Welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. Over the past year and a half, I've had the opportunity to speak with 4 or 5 different guests on a major theme for the province: food and food security. How is it that our province imports almost 90% of its food? Or put another way, why is it we can't feed ourselves? It's a major topic and a major theme. New Brunswick's identity once upon a time was founded on 3 things: forestry, fishing, and farming. Could it be that our new economy needs to go back to understanding the importance of farming and food production and local food consumption for the well-being of our province? So we hope you enjoy this composite show that has snippets from each of the different guests, because put together in 1 hour, it makes for a very interesting conversation. The first person that you're going to hear from is Suzanne White, who works with the Economic Social Inclusion Network. She's working with poverty issues in a very important way, and the connection between poverty and the ability to get good food is key. Please enjoy what Suzanne has to say.
A recent project that a group is working on called Community Food Smart. So it came out of our Great Gathering event, a number of people talking about food security issues. And what I love is when people don't try and recreate the wheel, but rather look around and say, who's doing it right and can we bring it here? Mm-hmm. So in St. John and Moncton, you have bulk food buying programs. Okay. So in essence, it's membership based. People once a month put in an order for a fresh produce bag, mm-hmm. and all of that money is collected together, and one order goes through direct to a wholesaler. Okay. So to the very same person that Sobeys and Superstore are getting their food from, that's who we go to purchase the food. Then a week later, a food truck rolls up, and out of the back comes all of these fabulous crates of fresh bananas and bags of potatoes, and then through another door come all of the volunteers that break it down into individual orders, packs it into bags that then go back out into their cars, back to different distribution points in the city. So
and it goes to people who signed up for this?
It's membership based.
Distribution points goes to, okay.
Yes. And in order to connect with the members that we wanted to draw in as distributors those people who have trusted relationships. So we know the dilemma of students. Mm-hmm. and the rising tuition rates and how that's having an impact on their ability to just feed themselves affordably. So we went up to the university and said, would you be a distributor for the bulk food buying program? Would you make it easy for students to be able to place an order and pick up an order by letting them just walk into the sub? They can put an order in at the start of the month, they come back a week later, they pick up their food bag and they can take it home. They don't have to worry about transportation. It's in their own backyard. And that's how we built the network.
And the dollar values are?
The bag itself is $15. Mm-hmm. If we tested it by putting all the flyers out for that week in front. And so I thought, okay, now where can I get the best deal on bananas, on potatoes, on onions and carrots? And I recreated the bag using those rates, and the bag costed out at about $30. Now that would be if I got in my car and I went to 6 different stores to recreate the bag. Yeah. If instead I went into one store and had a combination of sale items plus regular priced items, you're looking at more like $42 to $45 for a $15 bag. But that makes sense. Stores have overhead. This is totally volunteer driven, so we cut all of those costs out of the equation and we just deliver the value directly back. But back to what you originally talked about, how did it make a difference? We had on our advisory committee a very strong leader in our own community who lives in subsidized housing. So she got in the car with us and went to St. John and learned with us how the program worked. And you'd spend the whole drive back talking about, well, what do we like and what could we change? And then we got in the car and did the same thing, went to Moncton and learned from them. And one of her recommendations to us was, let's make it membership driven and totally inclusive, so that if I apply for the program, I don't have to do a means test. I don't have to walk in the door and prove to you that I'm poor and therefore I'm allowed to be a member. Because
it just is. You just join. Yeah. You know, and that's it. You're in.
My $15 is just as good as your $15, which is just as good as your $15.
And that's what I meant about the intangibles, because there's something else that happens. We might be doing this over here, and this is the concrete terms of it, but something else is also happening over there.
It's building pride, it's building respect, it's getting the stigma out of a program, as she would say. Please tell me that this is just not another program for poor people, but instead a solution for my community. We built that distributed network because, again, you talk about the power of the voice. In our community consultations, we had a young fellow who had just moved out of the homeless shelters into his own housing unit. And he sat and listened to all these great ideas happening about what we could do to improve services. And I can remember, I always hear Joy's voice in my head saying that you can build all the services in the world, but if I can't get to it, or you can't get it to me, what good is it?
Yep.
So we built a distributed network for this bulk food buying program. So you can walk into the university, into the Multicultural Association, into the Salvation Food Bank, into the Ormukta Food Bank, into our health clinics in the community, so Gibson, Noreen Richard, Kingsclere. So we're building an accessibility factor to make it as easy as possible for people. The end result of it is we started off with 40 orders and 4 distributors, 40 orders in our first month. We've now grown it to 13 distributors, stretching all the way from Ormukta to Nakawik, and we've got a membership base of 320 members with potential to grow. I do think it's innovative, but I see it as the only way to make it successful. So maybe I'm being very selfish in how I protect how this is growing. But we're providing the tools. So we created the framework. We created the relationship with the wholesaler. We drew in a partner that had expertise in purchasing food. We reached out to the city, and they found us space that we could pack in for no charge. We brought in a grocery store as a partner, and they're providing us with the bags. So basically, we created the frame, and then we just pass it back out to the distributor network to say, now you bring it to life. You know, you reach out to the people that you can know could best benefit. Neat example of the health clinics. So imagine someone coming in for the medical appointment, and the doctor or the nurse practitioner is saying, you know what, your cholesterol's through the roof, you've got issues with heart, and here's your prescription. And by the way, you need to eat healthier. And you get a cue from a person saying, you know what, I'd love to, but I can't afford the price of fruits and vegetables. To which out comes a brochure for Community Food Smart. And they say, this is what you need to consider. And by the way, when you go back out, you can stop at the reception desk and sign up as a member and put in your first order for a food bag.
And there's another thing that happens with that too, is that you're building a new community too, because a lot of these people might not have known each other. One of the characteristics of fighting poverty is the isolation element. And here's a community that's emerging around it. So how much fun for the person that you took with you to St. John and to Moncton to see those worlds and then come back and be jazzed about it back home.
What's exciting about it is that you break that paradigm that says, you know, there's things wrong with society, I wish someone would fix that. Or, you know, I know there's a better way of doing it. When is government going to finally come up with that solution? Instead, you can pull all that clutter out of the way and say, you know, you've got a good idea. Well, let's connect you with some other people that share that idea, so you feel some strength in numbers. Let's connect you with some resources to make it happen. But now we're going to put it back on you to create that change in the community that you want to see. And that's exactly what happened with this bulk food buying program. It was a number of people that said, we know we can do things better.
There was a question earlier, and I didn't want to lose it in case some of the viewers had the same question. You get your produce from a wholesaler, same wholesaler that supplies to the main grocery stores. The typical corporate model is that you're in competition with them and you're underpricing them and stuff. Obviously, you've made some peace with that, and you've mentioned earlier that some of those grocers are also supporters of this thing. That's a nice little breakthrough too. Can you speak to that relationship a bit?
We made that move to build that relationship before we even started the program, because we did not want to be perceived as being in competition. The folks that we're working our members are people that walk into a grocery store now and swerve to the right because they see the fruits and the vegetables in front and their perception is, I can't afford it. I can pay $4 for a broccoli, or I can go get a frozen pizza, and which will feed my family the quickest and the easiest and the cheapest. So we're targeting a market group that didn't tend to avail themselves of that section of the grocery store anyway. So in effect, what we're doing with our program is we're building up people's appreciations for eating fresher fruits and vegetables, with a goal being to make that part of their standard diet. So our food bag is not going to last someone for a whole month. But what we're hoping is that they acquire that taste for the broccoli, they learn different ways of incorporating that into their diet through different recipes. And when they go back into the grocery store, they look for broccoli when it's on sale and want to buy broccoli to bring it home for themselves and for their family.
I just want the audience to know how big this is, even though your story was about a garden. Because it's more than just a garden. Something like that? Know what I mean?
A prime example is a gentleman by the name of John, who came from John Howard. So I've changed his name, but basically he came to the community garden because he had the invitation. But he came, I think, with a little bit of trepidation, such that if you tried to talk with him, he would not look you in the eye, he'd look at the toes of your shoe, which was a little disconcerting because you didn't know if you were connecting or not. And he had on a big oilskin coat and a big hat, and he was a big man, and you thought, really? You want to be a member here? But John was the first to show up for any work assignment. He was the last to leave. He had a great deal of physical strength, so you relied upon him. You saved all the best jobs for John. And because he had what he could contribute to the garden, which wasn't necessarily a lot of gardening background, but at least he showed up, he was ready to work, and he was ready to do the heavy lifting. So when people saw John coming, they were so excited to see John. So what started to change for him is that he didn't feel like an outsider. He was welcomed, he was valued, he was appreciated. And over the course of time, what starts to happen is John starts setting up friendships with other people in the garden. And as a result of those friendships, he's starting to learn from other people how to cook the food at home better. He's learning how to garden better. He's being appreciated and valued and respected to the point that he now starts looking you in the eye again. Then you roll it forward another season and you see John, and you kind of take him back and you realize he's lost about 50 pounds. Physically, he's looking better. He's even dressing better. Roll forward another season, he's on the social committee. And he's now got a girlfriend. And he ended up moving to Nova Scotia because he got a job. So no, the garden didn't get him a job, but you saw the progression in his life happening. And I saw it through the eyes of him as a garden member. And the best news story of all is we're into our 4th season and John's coming back to Fredericton.
Okay.
When people think about the community inclusion networks that have been set up around the province, the core message I'd like them to appreciate is that we're looking for to build community capacity by breaking down the walls between the business, between nonprofits, between government, and creating a stronger voice for folks that lived experience in poverty to create those new solutions. We talked a lot about the community food smart model, and I get so excited about it because that's the prime example of what the potential can be when you just knock on the doors and instead speak in terms of, can you just give me something, I'm going to go away, but rather say, you've got an asset that could benefit us, and here's what we're going to achieve through it. Do you want to be a part of this great success story? And anyone that I've talked to, any door I knocked on, people have wanted to get involved. They see the bigger picture. We've got a caring community. We just need to figure out those pathways of interconnection so that we can leverage the existing resources that we've got in new and innovative ways to make the change happen that we want to see.
The next person you're going to hear from is Peter Linfeld, who is an economist and sees the world on a global term and understands how the global influences push back onto a small province like New Brunswick. At some point in our conversation, we got talking about food and local farming and local markets. Here's what Peter has to say about that. There was a time when New Brunswick was identified on the 3 Fs, the forestry, fishing, and farming. And that's another era, but if it's cyclical, and if it's been enough time that's passed, is it possible that security of food supply and all of the discussion that's emerging at grassroots levels about food, where's your food coming from, awareness of that, the 100-mile diet stuff, is that one of the areas that New Brunswick could reclaim its identity and develop some economic stability and start to have a sense of its own self-determination instead of just being buffeted by global winds and labor markets?
Absolutely, but it's an absolutely with qualifications, if I can put it that way. If we were to look at one of the states in the U.S. that has gone farthest down the road of organic farming and has made the most of it in terms of created the necessary markets, has propagated the necessary channels and supply chains to really make a go of it, and literally only in the last 30 or 40 years or so, that state is Maine. Most people would, if they were asked that question, would identify a larger and a state more associated with agriculture, perhaps out in the Midwest somewhere, Idaho or so. Yeah. But it's Maine, and it's Maine because there have been conscious decisions made with the support of government and very little support from government. And it's currently run by a Republican governor who's loath, he likes to squeeze every penny. So there's no extra money running around. Yeah. But the state of Maine has a network that includes the universities and associations and other elements of the private sector that have pushed these buttons to ensure that Maine is on the forefront of organic farming, and they've done a really good job. But could we do that? Absolutely. It's not a matter of just creating the supply and then hoping the demand is going to be there.
Exactly.
It requires that we push on both ends of it.
Our next 2 guests will speak about the National Farmers Union in New Brunswick. Ted Wiggins and Amanda Wildman are deeply involved with food production, marketing, distribution, and they have solutions to how our province can be better fed and have a healthier economy. Did you know, as you listen to Amanda, that a very small percentage shift in your buying pattern could have a huge impact on the well-being of farming in our province? Please catch what they have to say.
That definition of food security is fairly limited. So a group of folks decided to expand upon that, and it was led in part by La Via Campesina, which is one of the NFU's international partner organizations. We were a founding organization for their body, and that expands to food sovereignty. So even though this bill that was before the legislature was called a Local Food Security Act, yes, it really bordered on food sovereignty, and food sovereignty encompasses the right of farmers and citizens to have control over their food supply and design their own food system. And so this legislation really brought forth a lot of benefits for our local farmers, but the number one one of the benefits I think for farmers would also be that young folks would see that there's easier access to markets, therefore making it a more interesting career choice.
Yeah, if you look at the average age of farmers in the province, it's continually climbing. I think it's up around 55 or 56 years old now.
55, yeah.
And if that trend doesn't change at some point, we're going to run out of farmers. The number of farmers who say under 35 is very small. But I will say that when we have an NFU meeting or whatever, I'm surprised at how many young people do have that participate or turn out for it. Great. Which is, I guess, a positive step.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an idea what would turn that? Would a Food Security Act help turn that so more young people come? Because built in there is an awareness that they can get access to this as a career?
I think a lot of young people would like to be able to farm and have that kind of
lifestyle,
occupation, lifestyle, whatever. But to farm, you've got to be able to make a living at it. You don't want to be in a position where you have to do off-farm employment to subsidize the farm, because that's not fair to you. It's not fair to your family. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an interest there, and if people can make it work, they'll do it, and they'll put the hours in too.
Is the crux of that not having large enough markets to sell their product to because New Brunswick's population is too small? Or is it because of some other factors that get in the way of that?
It's not a problem of population, because right now we import more food than we produce. The problem is a lack of marketing opportunities, but it doesn't mean there's not a market. It's just a lack of opportunity. The centralized buying. You've only got 2 large or major grocery chains now, and most of that single desk buying, they don't want to buy from a number of small farmers. They want to be able to buy from one operator.
Yeah, more efficient that way.
Yeah.
So do you have thoughts to, well, where do you want to go next? Because there must be there's 1,000 things that just hovering behind that kind of claim. So do you want to go back to the legislation and talk about, was it frustrating to watch? Because I know you rallied, you had a bunch of people at the legislature, and you're watching something that connects to your fate, and it also ties to everyone in the province, because food connects all of us.
Yeah. I guess from my point of view, what was frustrating was that the cost of a local food security program versus the benefits that we could realize from it were so minimal. In other words, for a relatively small amount of money, I think we could have had a major impact on the New Brunswick economy, especially on rural New Brunswick. And rural New Brunswick right now is, you know, you're constantly hearing about the threat of school closures and hospital closures and so on. If we want to maintain rural New Brunswick and not waste that infrastructure, we've got a lot of land out there. Do we want it sitting idle and earning no income at all, or do we want to have something happening out there which will add to the economy, allow people to stay in small communities? And I think we could have done something with that for relatively little money.
I think one important element about the legislation, and one of the kind of arguments that government was using to refuse it, was saying that we're putting the cart before the horse, that we need to have research before we can have legislation. But in reading the bill, it clearly sets out provisions to establish interdepartmental cooperation and another steering committee and things like that. And one of the first provisions was to do the baseline research so that we would know exactly how many carrots, or how, like, we would have that research so that when we're setting targets, we're not saying all hospitals need to import 100% of their food next week, because reality is that's not possible. But let's set a target for within the next 5 years, everyone's eating 10%, buying 10% local food, or especially on the major contracts. So it was really a progressive. It was really just setting the pieces in place so that further action could be taken. Whereas supposedly further action is going to continue happening on food security, but there's no framework yet announced, and I'm not sure.
Is there any way to move forward with it without legislation? Is there a way that this change can occur outside of how the political machinery wants to go its own pace, really struggles with intersecting when a change needs to occur, and you just get on with it and make the change anyway?
Well, I think in some ways people are getting on with it in terms of, we'll say, the local farmers markets and so on. They're doing probably better overall than they have, for years and years. But at the Frederick market, for example, I see customers coming in or consumers coming in looking for local food, but they're never sure how to identify local food. And that was one of the parts of the bill that would clearly identify what's locally produced. And you have customers that have good intentions and they want to support local agriculture and the local economy. But how do you know if this is local or not?
So I just had a funny thought, the way we all struggle with peeling all the little stickers off the fruit and everything.
Yeah.
It's like if you came up with your own sticker and...
Well, and that's exactly it. So that's one of the things, like the NFU has been working on a local food strategy with different governments for the past 7 years.
Yes.
And that is the one biggest thing that we're asking for that has not yet come to fruition, is a labeling system that doesn't just identify local, but specifically identifies New Brunswick produced foods. And obviously there can be problems with that, but I think if you go to the grocery store and you see a New Brunswick produced food, for a lot of folks that will be their primary, might be their primary choice. But then there's nothing to say that we can't have a Nova Scotia produced and a PEI produced, so that folks are still supporting our region, but we just have that one more step of knowledge as to where, and it's happening in larger cities. There's and this is another really interesting intersection in terms of economic development. There are tech companies that are creating technology so people can scan on their restaurant menu on their smartphone, and it'll take them back to the website of the farmer who produced that meat that they're eating, or those carrots that they're eating with their menu. And so there are ways of connecting it, and I think people are more and more curious.
Which then means, how do you get a local section into the bigger stores? Do they ever open that up? Do they ever identify it? I think I saw something in the media 2 months ago about one of the food chains saying they'll create a local food section at the end of an aisle so that you would know in the produce section that when you walk over here, you're going to find New Brunswick grown product. No, it's not resonating, so it's not ringing any bells?
No, actually, I did hear some announcement like that.
But it didn't have an impact for you or through the
Well, it was too early to tell, but I guess my feeling is too often those things are tokens, and that's all they are. It's got to be more than a little section. You've got to actually have product there and have it fresh, and where people can see and access it, and it doesn't get stale. You know, it takes a real commitment, I think. But what I find really sort of interesting and I don't know, ridiculous at the same time, is that a lot of food is moved around for no purpose at all. I've seen figures where, for example, Britain exports X number of tons of lamb every year. And we'll say it was 100,000 tons of lamb every year. But they import 100,000 tons of lamb every year as well. And what's happening is people are taking advantage of, there's a little higher price over in this market, so we take advantage of that market. This is the traders. And there's a lower price here, we can pick it up here, and they're just moving food around all the time. And when you look at how far product, grapes come from Chile now, I mean, it's not sustainable in the long run.
There's a lot of talk in the local food economy, or buying local push that we see in all sectors right now, about the 10% shift. If we all could just shift 10% of our spending locally, like what economic impact would that have immediately? And so in New Brunswick, according to the 2011 StatsCan numbers, New Brunswickers spent $1,095 million on food and non-alcoholic beverages. So that's a big industry. So if we're looking at shifting just 10%, that's going to be over $100 million in direct return. So that's not including how many extra jobs are created or how much more infrastructure is developed and built, or like Ted was talking about, upstream and downstream jobs. So input companies or farm machinery repair companies or that kind of stuff. So that would be over $100 million with just a 10% shift. And when you break that down even further, 2013 is the most recent household level stats that Stats Canada provides. And they say that the average household spends $6,853 on groceries a year.
Okay.
So if we break that down, that's about $13 a week that every New Brunswick family would have to shift to buying local food for that economic benefit to take place. Like, we're really talking a small amount of money per individual, but that could have a huge impact on our
small act on a large scale has a huge consequence or a huge impact.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son. Between what once was and what's begun.
Our next two guests, Edouard Alain and Donna Thériault, are key members of a group called Ceux d'ici, a social enterprise program that has put local healthy food into the school system in the Fredericton area. It is possible to marry a new paradigm with a new service delivery. Imagine being able to employ people, buy food locally, and offer healthy food in the school system. It's huge. The significance is stunning on how it can impact not only the health of our children, but the economy that goes with schools. Please catch what they have to say and how they did it.
What they do now is much more gratifying, and one of our rules is that whatever revenues come out of this project, 5% of the revenues go to the employees. It's kind of an appartenance and an ownership kind of, and it's a motivational thing, but they like what they're doing. They realize that they're much better at what they do now than they've ever been. and there's a good morale among our staff.
So you've found a blend or a balance in the social enterprise structure for local food, healthier young people, and good quality of work for the people that are in the process of
Yeah.
But in numbers also, what it is a job creation project because we've increased the number of employees, we've increased their hours because we also have the cafe and the catering, don't forget. So that's given them more time. But they've become more viable jobs and more valued jobs, and that alone is a social benefit. Yeah.
This might not sound like it connects, but I'm thinking, is the difference that you're working for a social enterprise run by a board of directors that's local and connected community-wise? A successful business model in the Canadian football world are the Saskatchewan Roughriders, run by a board of directors, community-driven, and there's an ownership and a connection there that's very powerful. And it doesn't matter if the product's football or food. There's something to how
Absolutely.
the people come together working as a team that sounds like you've found it or you've caught something with
The
it.
Batters Titan has something like that too now.
Are
right?
they?
Yeah,
Could be.
yeah.
Yeah,
They
because
have been bought by a local
Group of
Yeah.
investors.
Yeah.
And
good. So
yeah,
that's how they
that's a-
survived.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So you're also wandering into a world of values too about food, and we'll get study after study about New Brunswick's obesity rates and the quality of our food that we choose to eat. Then they'll get into the cost of that food.
Yep.
What is that like with running a social enterprise to this scale with those same pressures and pulls?
The kids that 3 years ago we were serving salads and made from scratch food had an experience, with in their homes. Where today, 3 years after, those same kids have been presented food made from scratch and salads and local product, and we see the difference. In one school in particular, I recall in the first year where parents and kids were complaining there was not enough food in the plate. And then when we went and observed, we realized that there was salads that was being thrown away.
Yes.
So they were eating part of their food. All the different component values of food were in their plate, but if you don't eat one or two, you don't eat the grains and you don't eat the greens, chances are that maybe you're going to be hungry. So after talking with the teachers and the parents, we tried to encourage the kids to eat. We did not change the menus, and that problem went away.
It worked itself out.
The numbers came down for a little bit, but now the numbers are back up. So I guess I come back to my first point. Like 3 years ago, you had experiences in children. Now 3 years after, you're starting to see some change happening. And we figure that in 5 years, 10 years from now, the kids that will have started at grade 2 will be in grade 12. And as opposed to go to the fast food, which we have competitors on top of the hill in Fredericton, as opposed to go to fast food there, maybe they'll be interested in eating their salads and eating their food served.
It's such a key point because it's not, it's food literacy almost.
Yeah.
It's like being aware of where it comes from, but also what it does for your body and how good.
Yep.
And then there's the taste element, and then there's the convenience element.
Yeah.
When you first started, I'm thinking somewhere out there's parents watching going, how did you get kids to eat salad instead of eating chicken nuggets?
Yeah, exactly. Like those types of processed food, we try to stay away from it. We have a contract signed with a local beef producer in New Brunswick. Our grains come from local, our flour. We are searching for a good chicken biologic supplier. There are some good ones in the Moncton area, Dieppe area, but they're over exposed right now because of the Réseau des Cafétérias. It's another movement that are in 26 schools out there serving food from scratch, and they have they're taking most of his products. So there are some areas that we're doing very well, like maple syrup or products like blueberries and tomatoes. Like in the summer, like in about a month from now, we're going to buy thousands of pounds of tomato, and we're going to do all of our sauces for the winter. So these are all local product raised by our farmers and so on. So in some areas we're doing very well. Some other areas we're working with with the Real Food Connection, for example, and others for the storage of some of the food so that we could keep them in cool area, like, especially things like apple, carrots, potatoes. There's no reason why we don't serve 100% of what we serve.
Because it's what we produce here.
Exactly.
The quick point, is it organic or just whatever you can source?
Well, the objectives, right? We in our strategic plan, the plan d'affaires, we have essentially three guidance. The local product we want, and we are meeting 30%, aiming to 40% over the next 5 years. We want to increase that to 45%. Sorry. The Canadian product we want to increase from 60 to 70%. And our organic product we want to increase from 10% that we are presently to 15%.
Wow.
There are issues like in talking with the Department of Agriculture, and I think you were alluding to that a little bit earlier in our conversation.
Yeah.
There is a limit to what we could produce. Even if we wanted to serve 30% of those products right now, like organic, we probably could not get the produce, or they would be very, very expensive.
Yes.
In the Southeast region, they tell us that local products are about 43% more expensive than buying, like, in the big chains of product. And I could believe, I knew it was big, but I didn't think that was that big.
Yep.
Running an organization like us, about 40% of our expenditures goes towards buying product. 40% is the human resources, and then the 20% is for the other things. Pay your loans, pay your stuff. So if your food is that much, 43%, that's almost another 16%, 17% on top of your 40%.
Yes.
Now you're at 56% on the cost of food.
Yes.
So what we are trying to do to bring that down is to have some agreements with, like right now, the north side of the river in Fredericton. There's 2 schools that are thinking of getting involved in a project like CDC. We're going to work with the Réseau des Cafétérias in the Northeast to try to increase our volumes, to try to bring the price down. We associated with an organization in Fredericton called Food Smart, who provide basket of food. Again, for them, that's excellent because it reduces the price of their local food, and it has an impact on our overall purchase. So the goal is to continue to build those relationships and organize in each of the regions, maybe 4 or 5 regions in New Brunswick, both the production, the distribution, and the preparation of food. These are the 3 anchors of this idea. And if we do that well, and we have transportation of local product and preparation, someone may be very, very rich in fish and local product of the sea. Others may be very, very rich, like the Sussex area, etc., with milk and cheese and those types of things. So the idea, like the vision, is that if we do this properly, each of the region would have both production, distribution, and preparation, and we would exchange possibly from one region to the next. So if there's more resources in one region, that truck may stop at the border of the region of the next region and then exchange some cheese or exchange some fish, and then keep their route in their region. And every season it could be a different product that is like that. So that's how we think that if we go forward and we organize this properly. Recently, we met with a representative of Opportunity New Brunswick and Monsieur Desjardins, Pierre Marcel Desjardins from the University of Moncton. And I submitted that if, like right now, we're talking about 26 schools plus a couple of native reserve schools plus us, we may talk about 40 schools out of 311 schools. What's about if we had 150 schools? What about if we had the big FHS and the big Moncton High and those big schools where there is 1,500, 2,000 students? What is the potential of that in terms of developing our agriculture? What is the job potential? What is the job now if we go in half of the senior citizen home? around the province?
Yes.
What is the potential if we go in hospitals?
Under the social enterprise concept, the whole thing is community run, 100%. There are many schools in New Brunswick, including a lot of the Francophone high schools, that have their own cafeteria services. They've gone away from the private sector. But most of them are run partially, if not totally, by the school administration. And we all know that school administrators have enough on their plate, pardon the pun.
Yeah. That was a good pun.
Yeah. And this model here works best because it does not involve additional work by the school administration. We work very closely with the school.
Yes.
We are very, they have an input into all of our decisions. The student council sits on our board, and we have an excellent relationship with all of the school administrations. But when parents have a problem with the school cafeteria services, they don't call the school. They call us, our executive director. That has a big advantage, but it also has its drawbacks because we have to hire staff that most of the schools don't have to hire to manage. And the people you hire to manage, or to do the accounting for that matter, are not directly involved in the service.
Right.
Okay, so when you do these costs, human resources, these are added costs. You don't necessarily get them back through the price of the meals because you can't raise the price that much. So that causes a reality that if social enterprise is going to work in New Brunswick in these types of projects, there has to be some type of government incentive to get them off the ground, at least for the first 5 years. And DONA has sort of developed a formula that's really interesting, but the concept being that if this is going to work, you're going to have a lot of people who do a lot of volunteer work. And knowing our demographics in New Brunswick, we have a lot of retirees, young retirees, energetic and having a lot of expertise. Half of our board, more than half actually, are retirees. And you're going to get that volunteer piece. It's going to be there. But volunteers should have a situation where they don't have to worry whether they'll be able to pay the staff the following week and all that. And there has to be some type of incentive. And we believe we have a strong enough argument in job creation alone to make it worth the government's while.
Well, that gets into a whole lot of how this is also related. Because if you're providing healthier food and a culture of healthier food,
on the long run,
then if you look 20 years down the road, I still remember one of the fitness studies done in New Brunswick after phys ed was dropped, along with arts and culture stuff from the high school curriculum, and that foundation years was put in place. 15 years later, we had one of the most overweight cohorts from the 18-year-olds. Now they're 33, 34, and they get tested. And it wasn't part of the culture that was taught to them. You're coming at it 180 degrees the other way, and it's community-driven. But there does need to be a professional staff element to it that allows the volunteer to keep their enthusiasm up and energy up. And there's a dollar value to it. So the return on the investment by the government would be, well, you're doing a food thing, but maybe you're paying attention to 30 years from now or 20 years from now, you've got a healthier population.
Exactly, and that's worth a lot of money. So I'm just going to connect a little bit what Edward was saying with the business plan. We're a social enterprise, so that means this is not run like we have audited financial reports and we have budgets that have to be approved, and we have a 5-year business plan. That's very key, I find. The fact that it is social in the sense that it's owned by the community, and any revenue, 95% of the revenue, net revenue, will be returned back to the community. That also bring a value to like kind of second look type of thing. You know, like you have parents involved, you have leaders of organization, a nonprofit organization, you have youth involved on the board, in day-to-day decision, at annual meetings, and so on. And that provides kind of the oversight, the famous oversight that we hear a lot these days in very higher chambers. This is the same issue here. Like the social enterprise is good in the sense that it's run like a business, but it's also run in a way that the community values remain in your project.
The last person you're going to hear from on this show is Levi Lawrence of Real Food Connections. So Levi is one of those 30-something entrepreneur types who has found a powerful moment in time when he can bring together his passion for cooking and food with retail, enterprise, get food to the market, get food to you. That comes from local distribution systems and local production systems. So as a young social entrepreneur, he's found a niche that allows him to offer a full range of services. But also, as you listen to him, listen to his heart, because he recognizes the importance of food more than economy and more for health, but how it helps us nurture our collective soul and our family soul. Levi is a treat. Have fun watching.
The project is actually to change us from a one city focused retail store, which currently we're in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and bringing us to where we're a provincial company. And that expansion involves us opening a retail location in St. John, as you mentioned, but also it involves us becoming a small scale distributor for locally raised foods or produced foods everywhere in southern New Brunswick to begin. So that distribution of, a box of things to a pallet of things, there's nobody filling that need for perishable or food regulated like food safety items, cheese, meat, dry goods, produce. So it's a fairly aggressive and comprehensive project, but we're quite excited about it, and it's been 2 or 3 years in the planning.
Yes, you've been at this for a while too. How long has Real Food Connections been up and going?
Real Food Connections started somewhere around 4.5 years ago, and it started as I'll be honest, it started actually as a university project when I was doing entrepreneurship as a connection between the chef and the farmer. I'm an ex-chef myself, and that's considered my trade. And I also knew that I grew up on a farm, and I knew sort of the value of real food and the work that goes into it. And I knew that customers were looking for more and more real food, and I had worked in overseas, and I worked in other provinces. Yeah. And then I get to this point, it's like, okay, let's connect them. They're busy people, lots of ego, no time. Put a business plan together. I went in, and the farmers thought it was great. I met 30 farmers, got an idea what they're producing. I went into the kitchens, and as a chef, the people in the kitchens in Fredericton, which is where I started it, I knew them. It's a small world. Yeah, your network. And even though they're friends of mine, I went in and they said, oh, we can't buy your stuff. And it wasn't the price. I mean, the price would be a little bit higher on a lot of things. It was the inconsistencies, the seasonality, the difficulties, the not knowing, I can't put it on the menu because I don't know if you're going to have it 2 weeks from now. There was a lot of difficulties. So I said, oh, well, that's a bad business idea. But the same people who said no to that said that their families would, everything that made it difficult for them to buy it as a restaurant, their families would enjoy and would add value to them. The seasonality, the different qualities of things, the education, knowing where it comes from. So the reality of our world is I guess, just take out some of the feel-good story out of it and to make it just a business problem is a problem of aggregation. I mean, the supermarket chains are trying to buy local. I know that now Sobeys has a local food position for the Atlantic region, and their job is to come in and take out all the barriers. They're allowed to pay for food right when it arrives. They're allowed to allow food to go into one store as opposed to all stores. They're allowed to, give them shelf space with no extra costs and no fees. And even with all that issue, they're having massive difficulties because the reality of the situation is in New Brunswick, because there's no distributor or wholesaler or connection, that person still has to go to every individual producer. And the realities of that don't fit supermarket. They don't fit institutions. So our current business plan started mostly because we had 2 schools trying to buy from us. Yes. And they don't have time to go to every food producer. And then I need to get into another problem. They also don't want tomatoes, they want tomato sauce. And there's nowhere in Atlantic Canada that processes tomatoes in a food safe facility. But that's phase 2, food processing, but it's needed. So yeah, you need to have somewhere in the middle. An example would be when I lived overseas, when you went to a supermarket and say Belgium or Luxembourg or Germany or France, or these are communities I was in, you go to a supermarket and the produce of that supermarket is as likely to be down the road or somewhere else in the country as it is from somewhere like California or Southern America. Yep. And that's not the case here. You would be extremely surprised to find something from New Brunswick in the grocery store, and it happens, but it's very infrequent and it's a matter of note, but it's not overseas. And our thought on that is that when supermarket economies or that grocery model came to Europe, they had so many distribution chains and networks already built, that those systems were able to feed the supermarket network. So I know a producer in the Netherlands that, you know, they still grow all the turnips and the cabbage and everything they always grew for hundreds of years, because the farming family's been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And just at the end of the month or whenever they harvest, they drop it off the depot that feeds the institutional food supply, food management, supermarket distribution systems, because that system of getting it to market already existed. There was in-between businesses handling the sales and where it goes and the direction. We don't have any middle industry in the province of New Brunswick. So, you know, there's nobody handling the customer service, you know, that's feeding the food where it needs to be, who needs to buy it. There's no one-stop shop or one-place call for the people trying to buy it. And I'm not saying we need to become that scale in supermarket and large, but there's got to be somebody in the middle who's making those systems work. We are devoted to the small to medium scale, small producer, family businesses. We have over 120 different producers that we buy from. It's important to note that local food isn't just produce. I know that usually comes to that conversation, but there's over 70 cheeses made in the province. There's more meats that we produce in the province than you see in a superstore or Sobeys.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of stuff going on. And then we sort of aggregated or brought together, you know, all the different food and where it's from, and we have a grocery store that's, you know, your traditional small niche market store. But as we talked about before the show, like part of our investment that you don't see in farmers markets or small local food stores is that we spend half of our week online. We do website sales in 3 cities. We do home grocery delivery. We do Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus and Instagram and Pinterest and YouTube, and we run an online newsletter, and we run blogging articles and videos, and that wasn't possible 5 years ago. We weren't able to connect. So for a relatively low investment, we're connecting the bounty of what is produced in the province to everybody, making it convenient, and they might not all come into the store and buy it, but we're able to access that audience. So people know that it's existence. I think that we're also going to be able to take advantage of best practices from other regions, like we see in Ontario, even Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia has 2 associations that I wish we had in New Brunswick. One is Select Nova Scotia, and one is Taste of Nova Scotia. And between the 2, they feature the producers and the restaurants and the hotels that do local food, and they represent producers at trade shows outside of Nova Scotia, and they branded Nova Scotia's culinary scene.
Very
or
cool.
in PEI, you see Chef Michael Smith, who is he does a lot of great things on his own, and his name's on everything, but he's an ambassador for the island, well supported by tourism PEI. So like there's these different groups that they've pushed forward that have succeeded, where in New Brunswick we're still just deciding what direction we want to go. We have no one showcasing us, no one, you know, bringing the sexiness to food.
This is so awesome. Like someone can watch this show, make notes, and then they can run off in 1,000 directions with possible future business opportunities. And license plates, instead of be in this place, it should be eat in this place. Right?
Well, yeah, we're not the drive-through province. We're the drive-through and eat province.
There we go. So diners, drive-ins, and dives, you know, but New Brunswick version. Actually, there's probably a lot of merit in some of that stuff, isn't there?
I mean, the way I've sort of articulated it has been, I think that people need to value food more in their lives. And I mean, you see in other places in the world, it's a part of your community, it's the center of your family unit, it's the part of your area. Like you're very much in touch with what grows around you and how it's slaughtered and how it's cooked and prepared. And we, over the last couple of decades, have been taking, you know, food preparation out of the family unit. I mean, how many TV dinners and, you know, less cooking as a family. You're taking out, I mean, I talk to people all the time, and well older than me, that have never cooked a chicken or a roast, or like you're taking the production out. And that's a family social unit. You're taking out eating together as a family unit or as a community unit. You see less and less of that. You're taking the connection from the producer and where your food comes from. You've taken that out. So that's where I think a lot of the soul has been taken out of connection with the food. So it's not just, I guess, the spiritual connection to the people producing the food, but it's also all the ways that we engage and use food as a community center, a family center, and a cultural center. And the one way we want to improve that, and this is sort of a personal goal that's not in the business plan, is if we can build higher expectations for what people are looking for, and we can increase the value of food. If people valued food more, they'd cook more, they'd waste less, they'd eat together, and they'd talk more. A lot of, you know, in the pipe dream of mine is, here's this whole tick box list of social ills that could be cured if you just valued food more in your daily life and put more of your time, a higher percentage of your time and a higher percentage of your wallet into such a crucial part of your lives.
Thank you for watching this show on food. I hope you've enjoyed the full range of commentary, perspective, and heart that these different guests have offered over the past year and a half. We will continue to use food as a major theme on the Dennis Report. Until that time, thanks for watching, and as always, be good, have fun, and love each other.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son.